Personally, me myself, I'm not that into Christmas these days anymore. It's perhaps gone past now as I've got older. But you know, the Hobbits of the Shire, and perhaps even the Dwarves or even the Elves, maybe they've got some kind of wintry festivals for us to get our grubby mitts on and, you know, have joyous times in revelry. I don't know. But that's what we're going to be talking about today. And also, I will just apologise because it is raining and it's very loud. So I'm going to be trying to speak up so I can kind of cut some of that out. But anyway, let's get on into it. Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. This is Gone with Gandalf, and every single week we do these kinds of lore videos. Although at least for now we're doing these kinds of Christmassy themed videos, if you like. Except for this week there are no gifts because I thought, well, let's talk about actual events. So that is the subject for today, as I've already said. But if you do have any comments, then please pop them down in the comments and like and subscribe if you want. So I've mentioned Christmas, the Hobbits of the Shire. They have a similar midwinter festival called Yule, and Yule sounds it's kind of similar to Christmas, except originally, in our world at least, it was a pagan festival. It's not just the Hobbits of the Shire that celebrate Yule. Indeed, the men of Rivanion, so in Dale and places like that, they also do share this tradition. But down in Gondor, whilst yes they do kind of have a festival, they just call it Midwinter Festival. So they recognise Yule as just a northerner term. It's widely documented that Tolkien was a big, he's very fond of Germanic languages and just Germanic traditions, although he does borrow things from all over the place. But Yule is kind of one of those things as well. But the thing that they celebrate in the Shire, it's not quite the wild hunt of Odin, but it is pretty much the closest thing to Christmas that you can get on Middle Earth. But if we can just quickly mention that, as he is such a fond aficionado of German, we can just have a look there that Yule is very similar to the word in Swedish and Norwegian where you have Christmas as Yule, and then in Finnish you have Jol. So, you know, it's basically the same. So before we get into what actually they do for Yule, let's have a look at the Shire Calendar. Now, if you've got a copy of The Return of the King or just Lord of the Rings or anything, or you could just have access to the internet, you can go into the appendices of the book, which is basically after the story. And if you go into that, you can actually have a glance at the Shire Calendar. And it's quite interesting, really. They've got 12 months, each with 30 days, and then they've got 5 days which don't fall into any month of the year. They've got 2 in the winter and 3 or 4 in the summer, depending on whether or not it's a leap year. And then that's how they get round to 365 days in a year, as we do. And those 2 days then that do not fall into any month of the year in the winter, they are the 2 days of Yule. So yes, there are 2 days. There's day 1 and day 2 Yule. And day 1 Yule is actually the last day of the year, and then day 2 of Yule is the first day. So it's kind of like Christmas and New Year's all wrapped into one. The first day of Yule then, post noon, they would have a great feast, and that would kind of be that. And presumably that would then go into the second day as well. However, you know, Hobbits, if you can remember Pippin back in The Fellowship of the Ring, in the films particularly, Billy Boyd played it really well when he's talking about, oh, but what about second breakfast and all this and that. Well, of course, the Hobbits, they really like to eat and they really like feasting, and this isn't really something just tied to Yule. And actually, this happens every single Friday, which is also a high day. So it's always a holiday post-noon, and every single Friday they would then feast and basically have a grand old party. So it's not really anything special, other than the fact that then Yule kind of carries on into the Saturday or the third day. And if I'm just going to insert some real world things into this as well, if the first day of if the first day of Yule, if that is equivalent to, say, Christmas Eve, And he's kind of taken these from, like, I know in Scandinavia, technically, Christmas Eve is kind of when you would celebrate Christmas. At least it is in Finland. I'm pretty sure it's the same in Sweden. And up until noon on Christmas Eve, it is just a regular weekday. So shops will be open and then they shut. And then you have the Christmas peace declared. And then Christmas begins. And then you have Christmas Eve and Christmas Day is kind of like a follow-up. And I think that's kind of what Yule would be like. However, then it's not really, because actually Yule, the 2 days of, is part of Yuletide, and Yuletide then lasts a whole 6 days, a whole 6-day extravaganza, which encompasses the last 2 days of the month that precedes Yule, which is called for Yule, and then it also includes the first 2 days of after Yule. And all of that time, presumably, is just dedicated to feasting. And hobbits, even though they're very small, they do enjoy to have a good bit of food. And then a nice point is that actually, following the Battle of the Five Armies at the end of The Hobbit, Gandalf the Grey and Bilbo Baggins on their way back from the Lonely Mountain back to the Shire, they actually stop over at Beorn's house. Because as you can remember, Yule is not only celebrated by those in the Shire, but also Northmen, so those up in Dale, Vales of the Anduin, and even the Rohirrim. So for Yule 2941 of the Third Age to 2942, that is where Bilbo was, and I'm sure he had a very good time. Okay, well that's the Hobbits done, and I'm not going to lie, that was pretty much most of the video. So, let's move on to the Elves, and well, the Elves don't really have anything. They do not celebrate a Midwinter festival. They're kind of anti-winter in many ways. They're more about the spring. Now in the Hobbit films, I think it was called The Desolation of Smaug, so the second one, you had the elves kind of celebrating Mereth Nuin Gileath, which is Feast Under the Stars. And well, this is not canonical, it's not really anything that actually exists, but it's just in there. But of course the elves, they really do like the stars, because if you go way back to their awakening at Cuivenin, there was no sun, there was no moon, and all they had was the light of the stars that had been fashioned by Vardar. So yeah, that's kind of a nice idea, and presumably they did kind of dance under the stars a lot, but whether or not it's a real thing, I mean, Tolkien never spoke about it. However, as I said, the spring was more what the elves are all about, and in Gondolin, in the Book of Lost Tales, it does actually tell us that there's an event called Nost Nulathion, which is the birth of flowers, which is basically when you've got, well, they were kind of surrounded by mountains in this great valley, and when all the snowmelt came into the valley, then you had this great burst of life and a load of flowers, and they had a really good time because they like that kind of thing. And well, aside from that, they did have a lot of harvest festivals also, and this was kind of seen then when Morgoth came and took the Silmarils and killed the 2 trees of Valinor. Everyone was busy feasting, and then also when Eärendil finally made it to Marn to plead, you know, for mercy for the 2 kindreds at the end of the First Age, yeah, there was no one around because they were all feasting, and harvest festivals are really like the one thing that they really get on board with. But then finally then, the dwarves, and they actually do have a festival that does kind of slot into this area of time that we are in the calendar right now, and that is Durin's Day. Now Durin's Day was the first day of the last moon of autumn before the threshold of winter. So basically it's just the start of the final cycle of the moon in the autumn time. And this typically, well, for the dwarves, I think, well, if we look at the Hobbit, Durin's Day was kind of approximately around the 19th of October. And all the dates that I could see were in October, suggesting that the winter kind of begins for the dwarves in November. Now the dwarves, they don't have any kind of festival for this, other than it just marks the beginning of their lunar year, and that is it. There's not really anything else said about it, other than the fact that, well, we were just speaking about The Hobbit, and of course there's a big thing tied in with the secret doorway into the Lonely Mountain and Durin's Day. And of course the riddle was that stand by the grey stone when the thrush knocks, and the setting sun with the last light of Durin's Day will shine upon the keyhole. And that is then how they got into the secret avenue into the mountain. But just like Easter, this day changes every single day because it's all around the moon, and so there's no hard and fast day for Durin's Day. And then also the dwarves have a very odd calendar then because of that, because they shift the beginning or the first day of their year every year basically. So they end up having to have leap months sometimes, and that is all appointed by the head of the House of Durin, which at the time of The Hobbit, that would have been Thorin Oakenshield. But that really does get very complicated, and that would need its own video. So that is the end of this video though. So I hope that was kind of illuminating in some way, you know, just talking about the different events that you might see in Middle-earth. Now I did just ham-fist the elves in there because they don't have really anything else to say about them, but it's really all about the Hobbits. The Hobbits, they've got the best festivals, you know, that's kind of their thing. That's like their niche. They just eat, and yet somehow they're all really, really small. I suppose dwarves have kind of got that going on for them as well, but they are like a foot taller as well. So anyway, I quite enjoyed having a look into this topic. So I hope that you enjoyed it as well. But if you didn't, then you can let me know. And if you want me to cover anything else, then you can pop that down in the comments as well. But for now, thank you very much for watching. And I'm going with Gandalf. Good day.